Well, hello again, everyone. I want to share with you one of my favorite stories about Epiphany moments. And it's not a personal story, rather it's more of a legend, and it has to do with Archimedes and the Golden Crown. And some of you may be familiar with the story, but I've got my own little twist on it. So even if you're familiar with the story, listen carefully to some of the highlights that I'm going to be stressing. So as the story goes, and you're probably familiar with this, um, the king was concerned because some of his courtiers had said that the crown he'd commissioned uh, as a tribute to the gods in thanksgiving for a military conquest um, probably was not made of solid gold, and that the craftsman involved had substituted a cheaper metal for the gold. Now, this was really problematic for the king because you don't give gods the second best. In fact, anyone knew at that time that if you give the gods second best, there are going to be unpleasant consequences. So the king was upset. His reputation was at stake, his brand was at stake, and there was always the possibility of the gods being vengeful. And so it was imperative for him to find out whether the crown was made of gold, as he commissioned it to be, or whether there'd been a cheaper metal substituted. So he called in Archimedes, the scientist, to figure this out. And this was a challenge for Archimedes because his brand was at stake too. If he gave the wrong answer, then the craftsman would go to the gallows or worse. If he gave the wrong answer, it could be that the craftsman would also be acquitted when he was guilty. So a lot was at stake for him. He needed to have the right answer, the truthful answer. Um, wasn't quite sure how to go about it. So he took a bath. And this is important. The bath piece is important because what happened was he took time out to reflect. He took time out um, to think, to rest, to strategize. And I think when we're trying to have an epiphany moment, when we're trying to see clearly, we do need to take that time for reflection. We can't just say the first thing that comes into our head. We can't just go on a hunch, but rather we need to be clear and gather data to the extent possible. And yes, there may be an intuitive hunch, but we need more than intuition sometimes to arrive at the truth. There's a question of facts. So how do you, in an age when a lot of the testing would have available today was not present, how do you think that Archimedes went about this? Well, the answer came to him when he got out of the bath, and whether he was in a bathtub or whether he was in a swimming pool, but he was in some body of water and realized that when he got out of the water level was displaced and went down. And so he realized that the weight of an object can displace the same volume of water as the weight, as he did in the bathtub. And that's when he had his Eureka moment, this incredible breakthrough of understanding how to weigh an object that's in water and look at displacement to see what the object really weighs or is made from. And this is when he is so excited that he screams out, Eureka, Eureka, I found it, and runs through the streets of Syracuse naked, according to the legend, of course, and then puts this to practice. He finds a piece of gold that would have weighed the same as the crown and put the fake crown, or the crown that was questionable, in the water to see how much water it displaced, and then put the lump of gold that should have been the same weight as the crown in the water, and saw that it displaced more water than the crown itself, which meant that the crown did not have the same gold composition as the gold blob, which meant that the craftsman had indeed substituted a cheaper metal, an inferior metal, for the gold, that the king had been cheated. and that therefore there's now ample evidence that the king's brand had been spoiled and the gods were going to be affronted and something had to be done. And so on the basis of his testimony, then the craftsman gets imprisoned, probably tortured, probably put to death, and the king has to commission a new crown. But meanwhile, Archimedes has made a reputation for himself as somebody who can see beyond the surface and expose the corruption that was at stake here. So an epiphany moment then can expose things which are unseen and unknown, and not necessarily with a scientific theory, though some people have arrived at scientific theories in the most unusual ways, whether through dreams or whether through the kind of study that Archimedes ended up doing based on his instincts in the bathtub. But the important thing is to go beyond the hunch and to look for evidence, to look beyond the fake news and look for supporting documentation. So we're not simply accepting the truth of the craftsman who says, oh, this is made of solid gold, but we look beyond the exterior, we look beyond the glitter, and we see beneath the glitter, and we see that there's lead when we'd been sold a bill of gold. And so our eyes are opened, not just by someone saying you've been had, but rather we see for ourselves. And this takes evidence, which is why it's so important not just to assume something is the way it is, but rather to have the supporting evidence that's indisputable. And so just as Archimedes supports his claims against the craftsman, so we too need to take that time for reflection, that time for insight, that time for rest, that time for a bath, and come up with supporting evidence to support the positions that we take, that we don't simply think what other people think, that we don't simply assume what they assume, but rather we have solid evidence to back our positions rather than spreading mistruth or lies or falsehoods or fake news. Rather, we have access to reality itself. So on that note, I'll sign off and look forward to our next connecting.